Hello and welcome to the NFL Sunday Recap Podcast for Week 16. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. And we had some good news, some bad news for potential playoff teams this week. But the first one has nothing to do with playoff teams because these are two of the worst teams in the league. 49ers and the Lions. Lions have actually played much better in the second half, but after their bad start, they didn't quite play nearly as well as the Chiefs, who turned around a terrible season. But not a whole lot to see in this one. We saw, you mentioned it was not a fantasy-friendly 32 points, but Detroit did score 32 points. So Calvin Johnson, solid game. Outside of Calvin Johnson, I mean, you weren't targeting this game heavily, and there wasn't anyone that had a good enough game that it really mattered in GPPs or in real life.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this game, maybe if the Lions had a better offense and were competent at putting up more fantasy-friendly points, we'd be all over this one because San Francisco's terrible on defense, but that was the case. We kind of skipped over that this week. And I mean, Johnson, I guess you look outside of Julio Jones, he was really the top wide receiver, Allen Robinson, but Calvin Johnson, if you faded him and went a little bit cheaper, or didn't fade him and went cheaper there, it kind of paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. And then next up, the game that everybody's talking about from yesterday, Patriots and Jets. And you and I were talking before we started recording here about everybody's up in arms about did Bill Belichick lose on purpose, which is the stupidest thing I've ever heard, because you're going to be hard pressed to find a more competitive coach and quarterback combo than Brady and Belichick ever. And he has done this before, and it worked last time. So for everyone who wants to sit out here and make up scenarios and all this ignorant things about why the Patriots wouldn't want to win this game, which makes zero sense, especially to a division team that they probably don't want to play in the playoffs. It was a great game. It was a lot of fun to watch this one. You kind of knew the whole time the Jets were going to make the one mistake to let the Patriots get back in the last minute, and they did. But ultimately, much bigger win for the Jets than it was as a big loss for the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the Steelers losing, this turned out to be a huge game, and this was a fun to watch. Probably my favorite game to watch of the day, and it was fun watching Ryan Fitzmagic do his thing out there. One, because he was on my season-long team in the championship, so I needed that extra touchdown there. And I mean, this was Brandon Marshall, continues to have a solid second half here. 8 for 115 with 2 touchdowns, and Decker grabbed a touchdown. I mean, these guys have been really one of the more underrated passing attacks this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're the team now that, with the Steelers on the outside looking in, looking unlikely, they're the team that could come in that 6th seed that, I mean, you aren't scared of the Jets, but you don't really want to play them because they're just a good all-around team. I've even got a friend who's a Jets fan who's been hating on this team forever, and I keep saying this is a good team, and I had to convince him. So he's still not quite a believer, but I don't understand why. Colts and Dolphins next up. And this one came down to the wire as well and did have playoff implications because had the Colts lost, they would have been officially eliminated. I know you're a Colts fan. They're not technically out yet. There is some crazy scenario where every other team in the world loses and or ties or something crazy like that, and they get in. But it came down close to the end, but the Colts did hold on. And Frank Gore, 2 touchdowns on his first, 6 carries. So he kind of set the tone early, and then you didn't really need much else past that because the Colts defense played pretty well.
Yeah, and Denny mentioned Frank Gore being a solid play in his slate breakdown this week, so hats off to him because, that was a big call. And, other than that, it was really the Colts defense and special teams that came away because, they sacked 6 times. Ryan Tannehill had a safety and 1 interception, so they were really cheap defense that paid off. And if you didn't see the end of that game with the Miami Dolphins offensive line not even moving on the final play, and then Indy just tackles Ryan Tannehill. It's hilarious. You need to see that.
Yeah, that was brutal. If you were watching Red Zone, it cut to all these things, so it was embarrassing ending. But this next one, not a lot to see. It was Brandon Weeden and it was Zach Menberger, and it was the Texans just absolutely crushed this team. Obviously, significantly better defense. Titans, not a great offense, even with Marcus Mariota in there. And DeAndre Hopkins scored a touchdown.
Yeah. It's been a while.
Yeah. So Brian Hoyer getting closer to that playoff spot that he deserves, and that's what I care about in this game.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that the Texans' defense was a very nice cheap play, though.
Yeah, definitely were. And no Dorial Green-Beckham anywhere on the field at all was disappointing because if you took a cheap shot on him, he left it with a big 0.
Yeah, absolutely. And J.J. Watt, we saw Titans getting down close to scoring touchdowns, and, he just is back to dominating. So the Texans are another one of those teams that nobody really worried about in the playoffs, but you figure most teams are going to struggle to score against them. You just don't anticipate they're going to score much. So they could be a sneaky team, maybe pulls off one upset, I guess, but I'm not much of a believer in them anyway.
No, me either.
Two great players, Hoyer, J.J. Watt. That's it. I guess
DeAndre Hopkins.
I guess. Browns and the Chiefs. This one was ugly. Chiefs were huge, almost 2 touchdown favorites in this one, which seemed really, really high. And the Browns, I mean, they've been competitive, I guess. I mean, they kind of kept it close with the Seahawks for a little while last week, but then we saw the Seahawks this week. We'll get to them in a minute. But Chiefs clinched their playoff berth, though, 9 wins in a row after 1-5 start. So it wasn't a pretty win, but they got the win, as they should have, against the Browns. And the Browns, in true Browns fashion, get down within striking range to potentially get a shot at the end zone, and the clock runs out. So hats off to them for being consistent.
Yeah, I mean, if you had the Chiefs defense, you were pretty bummed out because, first of all, you had the Vikings, Texans, Colts, pretty much everyone else go off for monster weeks, and then Chiefs, who have been putting up monster performances, kind of laid a dud this week. And it was frustrating because Manziel would just scramble out of the pocket, not get sacks, or only threw 1 pick. And I mean, maybe he was sober this week. I don't know what happened, but I was a little bit bummed out.
Nothing to party about this past Saturday night with him. So it was an ugly game. It was close. If you bet the Browns to cover, that's about the only good thing you got out of this game, really. Yeah. Cowboys and Bills next up. I mean, speaking of disgusting, just ugly games. First of all, nobody cared who won this game. I imagine if you're someone who plays DFS a lot, you probably didn't have much exposure. Maybe Sammy Watkins or Tyrod Taylor in some spot, but I had Carlos Williams. He had a bunch of yeah, exactly. He had some touches. Mike Gillislee did as well. Both guys were okay because they were so cheap, and that's kind of about it for this one.
Yeah, I mean, they both found the end zone, although Gillislee could have had 2 touchdowns. He stepped out at the 1, and then Carlos Williams just popped it in. So that was kind of lucky, but Williams did get syndicated. Yes, me too. But, I mean, they both face the Jets next week, so I think this will be the end of the road for those two in my lineups.
Yeah, if you have any Week 17 championships, I certainly don't mind sitting those guys, especially at a game that means a whole hell of a lot to the Jets. No Bills for me. Sorry, Josh Shepardson. I'm not a Bills fan next week. Go Jets. Next up, Bears and Bucks, and you mentioned 47 total points. Doug Martin, a guy that I had some shares of, more than I would like to admit. But at the time when he scored his touchdown, he had -1 rushing yard, and then didn't manage a whole lot else. At least he got in the end zone to kind of, give you a little bit of a floor and not completely shatter your lineups, but with other guys in better spots that were cheaper. It was a contrarian move, but one that just eventually didn't pan out.
Yeah, I mean, he had a great matchup against Chicago, and I mean, this is one where actually game flow didn't hurt him. He still could have ran the ball a ton, but after that second fumble, he was pretty much done. You saw Charles Sims come over and had over 100 combined yards and a receiving touchdown. But I think the big story of the day was Mike Evans not getting a ton of targets with Vincent Jackson out like we saw earlier this season, which I kind of anticipated him doing, but it didn't happen because Winston still spread the ball out, and it was still not a fantasy-friendly passing game.
Yeah, and on the Bears side, anybody that you would have played did not play well. Ka'Deem Carey, you mentioned, was the guy who got all of the meaningful points, and I took a shot on Eddie Royal for a minimum at a couple places, and his first 3 catches went for a combined 1 yard, so that's kind of how that game went for the Bears.
Yeah, if Matt Forte sits next week, I'm all over Langford facing Detroit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm on board with that, too. Panthers and Falcons, this one, the ending of it was absolutely crazy. I mean, you see the Panthers get a stop late in the game when the game was already should have been over. Atlanta should have run out the clock. They get offensive penalties, and they get another offensive penalty. But the Panthers, rather than backing them up and using clock, let them run another, or they decline the penalty. They kick a field goal. Cam Newton gets the ball back, fumbles, and I'm not a Panthers fan. I'm not a Panthers hater, but I like to see a team like Atlanta pull off a big upset. And you see after the game, everyone trash talking and saying that the Panthers are sore losers, and good for them. I mean, you get the big win after the Panthers just were all high and mighty, and Cam Newton kind of killed some of my teams this week. I won't say killed, but he was disappointing. But
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't feel bad for him. You're 14-1. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to sit here and cry for you, guy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to cry for my lineups because I had plenty of Olsen and plenty of Newton and just didn't get anything going. Well, Julio Jones, I mean, a miraculous catch, had a monster day, 9 for 178 and a score. And I mean, he did some damage against Josh Norman, but his big catch came pretty much over double coverage with a couple of linebackers there. So if you played Julio Jones as a contrarian play, you really probably made out.
Yeah, yeah. If you played him over Antonio Brown, you are the top 1% of the GPPs easily.
Yeah.
I think
Or
you're
you
about 2%.
misclicked.
Yeah, yeah. Or you thought that he was Antonio Brown and you were drunk. You were day drinking Saturday morning. But either way, yeah, he was huge at a very low ownership. Steelers and Ravens, my favorite game of the day, with the Steelers falling to the Ravens. And I was watching Red Zone, or I was watching on Sunday Ticket, I think it was, and I see it's 20-10. Ravens get a pick six at the 1 yard line and run it back for a touchdown. And I think game's over. There's like 7 minutes left. I didn't realize there was a penalty on the play. So I'm over here excited because obviously being a Bengals fan, nobody wants to face the Steelers, so everyone should be happy other than the Steelers. But either way, I see that thinking the game's over, then all of a sudden I cut back. D'Angelo Williams is scoring touchdowns, a 3-point game. And then on that final play, I mean, I don't understand. I mean, I know it's 4th and 15. You got to throw where you throw. But, I mean, Marcus Wheaton wasn't open. And you've got Antonio Brown and Martavis Bryant. Neither one of them. You don't throw the ball to Antonio Brown. I don't care if he's double covered on the last play. Like, I'm throwing the ball to Antonio Brown.
Yeah, I'm getting him the ball, and I was a little surprised because this game kind of set up a game flow where both of those guys really should have had a ton of targets, and none of them really did. You look at Baltimore, they kind of controlled the clock and ran the ball a lot of times, ran the ball 31 times, which really kept the Steelers off the field. And when they were on the field, Big Ben was thrown into the other team. So if you just played D'Angelo Williams in this game and you didn't play anyone else, you dodged a major bullet.
Yes, absolutely. Jags and Saints, just as we anticipated, no defense on either side, tons of points. Blake Bortles, kind of as we've grown accustomed to, horrible first half. I think he actually, I don't know about FanDuel DraftKings score, but I know I had him in one of my season-long leagues. He had negative points at halftime and ended up with, I think, 30-something or some ridiculous amount. So 90-yard touchdown down Robinson and a couple touchdowns down Hearns certainly doesn't hurt that.
Yeah. I mean, really the only one who disappointed on Jacksonville was Julius Thomas, who somehow didn't get in on any of the action in the passing game. A little disappointing, but they are the garbage time kings of DFS, Jacksonville. Should happen next week, too, against Houston as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jags are the guys you play. You expect they're going to be down, and then they get their points when they get them, and no one ever plays them. I mean, they're always low. I mean, Allen Robinson had a decent amount of ownership, but Hearns didn't. Bortles did, I guess, decent amount depending on.
Not as much as you would think playing the Saints this week.
Yeah, I mean, Brian Hoyer was higher owned against the Saints. Most people were. I mean, everybody. And it's strange to see how low he was compared to some other guys against the Saints. But in that first half, you see all the hate tweets. The Anthony Davis of the NFL. Everyone's out here insulting Blake Bortles until the third quarter, but worked out well. My favorite Vine of the entire week. I don't know if you saw this one, but Packers and Cardinals. The Cardinals just absolutely smashed the Packers, who they don't even look like a playoff team right now, but they'll be in by default. But you see Clay Matthews just laid out Carson Palmer and acted like he's going to help him up, and then just pulls his hand back.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
No, if it wasn't Carson Palmer, you'd probably be like, that's not classy.
I'd probably still laugh.
Because it's Carson Palmer, it's funny.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It definitely does get an extra bump for me being Carson Palmer. But either way, I think with most quarterbacks, that'd be pretty funny.
Yeah. I mean, it was. But especially when you're down 20 points already and not looking to really get into the game, because Arizona's defense, unbelievable. I mean, absolutely unbelievable. 9 sacks, forcing 3 fumbles, 2 of them for touchdowns, and a pick. I mean, that's insane. Those are insane numbers for a defense.
Yeah. So do you think this was more of a product of a very good Arizona defense or just a bad Packers offense? Because I'm leaning bad Packers offense. I mean, both, of course. But I think this Packers offense is bad.
Yeah, I mean, their offensive line's terrible. I mean, right now, and they're injured, and they have no one to throw to. Devontae Adams can't catch a ball. Randall Cobb, James Jones really not on the same page with Rodgers, but maybe cut those numbers in half, I guess, because I think Arizona's defense is really good.
Yeah, that's true. The Packers, normally each year you think, well, they're going to get it together. They're the team you don't want to play in the playoffs, but I don't think anybody in the NFC is really worried about playing them in the playoffs right now.
Yeah, I would want Green Bay.
Yeah, I wish they were in the AFC because I wouldn't mind Bengals taking them on. But either way,
Houston's not bad enough.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the Bengals always find a way to lose to Houston in the playoffs, so I'm hoping to avoid that situation again. Speaking of a team that always finds a way to lose, Seattle has now lost to the Rams twice this season, and as far as your money line bets go, this was your play of the day. Not that anyone outside of maybe Marshall Faulk or Isaac Bruce, maybe an ex-player. I don't know who would have bet on this game, but the Rams got it done against Seahawks. Their defense that was great at the beginning of the year struggled in the middle of the season, playing pretty well over the past couple weeks, and I mean that was the difference in this one. And of course, Todd Gurley doing what he does. I mean, he didn't have a huge number of touches, didn't have many touches at all in the first quarter, but I mean the Rams were just the better team yesterday.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, their defense looked really good, and I mean, finally, Russell Wilson faces a top 15 defense, because I guess I would put the Rams in the top 10 when they're playing at their best. But I mean, finally, he plays a top 10 defense and kind of goes back to his his early season ways, and I guess his streak has kind of run out here against a good defense, and now we'll face Arizona next week.
Yeah, and that's going to be a big game for both, because I guess now if Arizona wins and the Panthers lose, which isn't necessarily likely, but it's possible Arizona gets home field now, so
tough place to play.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting Week 17 for a lot of teams. Giants and Vikings, I won't say we expected how it happened, but I don't know that any of us expected the Giants would put up much of a fight without Odell Beckham, because he's just such a huge part of their offense. I mean, Rashad Jennings ended up being okay with the big touchdown, but that's it. And the Vikings defense just absolutely dominated, and that was one that Josh was on a lot on in the defense article, and they paid off in a huge way this week.
Yeah, big time. And Reuben Randall, he was the guy who really found the end zone. Two catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown. Just saw 5 targets in OBJ's absence, so didn't really take a huge toll on the offense there. And I think Rashad Jennings was the one who really saw the increase in touches. But Blair Walsh, my fantasy stud of the week, five field goals. He did miss an extra point that really pissed me off.
Finishing with, I think, only 22 FanDuel points. So
yeah,
that was embarrassing. But Jerick McKinnon, another Kadeem Carey style game where he steals a couple touchdowns. But I mean, this game was just such a blowout in the fourth quarter. Somebody had to keep actually running plays, because the Giants aren't allowed to forfeit, as like they probably would have wanted to in about mid fourth quarter here.
Yeah, and Kyle Rudolph, 53 yards and touchdown, continuing the trend. New York can't defend tight ends, so that was nice to see. If you took a cheap shot on him,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you played, you'd be surprised. 49 points from the Minnesota team, and I mean, Jerick McKinnon out here getting the most touchdowns is frustrating. But
yeah, 2 touchdowns. But Peterson got his 104 yards and a touchdown.
Peterson got his, and then he got the rest. So it's good for him. Yep. That'll wrap things up here for us for this week. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got lots of other content at dailyfantasycafe.com.